Okay, guys, welcome. I'm very excited to be joined by my good friend, Dr. Sara Gottfried, today, who is going to be spilling the beans about how to reset your metabolism, how to reset your body, how to help you lose weight more effortlessly and in a more sustainable fashion than you may have been able to in the past. So if you're somebody, especially if you're a woman who has struggled with the last 5 or 10 pounds, or if you're just having trouble, you're at a sticking point, or just you're trying to do everything right. You're trying to eat well, you're exercising, but still nothing's budging. What Sarah's about to share with us today is going to be amazingly insightful. So if you guys don't know who Sara Gottfried is, she's a Harvard educated doctor, gynecologist. She's been in this space for years. She's probably the most nitty gritty scientific nerd that I know, other than maybe Chris Kresser, but you guys are both friends, so that makes sense.
That's true.
And I'm very honored to call you a friend. I mean, we've hung out so much. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you and David, and any opportunity I have is to do that is always a treasure. So thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely, Yuri. It's so good to be with you and with your people.
Awesome. So let's jump into this. We'll talk about the new book that you have coming out in just a second, the Hormone Reset Diet. But let's talk about why women, why are women nowadays having such trouble losing weight?
Well, there's a number of reasons. I always look at the world through hormone colored glasses because I just think hormones drive what we're interested in, and they also stand between us and that lean body that we want. Because hormones really dictate what your body does with food. So that's what drew me to write this book. I wrote my first book, The Hormone Cure, and I had so many people say to me, okay, I'm getting my hormones into a better place, but help me with the weight loss. Like, put it together for me in a really prescriptive way. And I had been working with this 21-day plan for a while, and that's basically what turned into this book that we're talking about today. But, I want to get quiet here for a moment too, Yuri, and
Sure.
just say that I struggled with food quite a bit, especially in my 30s. And I was carrying around about an extra 25 pounds.
Mhm.
And I didn't, even though I was a hormone doctor, I didn't sort of put it together that my weight loss resistance, my difficulty losing weight was totally related to my hormones. So it's one of those things where your mess becomes your message, right, Yuri? And I when I reset my hormones, it changed everything when it came to my weight.
Yeah, totally. And that's what I love about you, is that not only are you so much of an expert in this space and so well educated, but you're also the real deal. Like, you've gone through this not like 40 years ago, but a couple years ago, and this is kind of like real. This is stuff that you've gone through yourself. So what are some of the things that you've noticed, and you still work with patients and stuff, and you see them in your clinic. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing nowadays, especially with women as it pertains to their hormones?
Well, there's a number of trends. I think an interesting one is to take a look at estrogen. So estrogen is the first reset that we do in my book. And there's this interesting phenomenon right now where a lot of people are trying paleo. And there are many things that I love about evolutionary biology and an emphasis on ancestral health.
Hmm.
But I've also seen a lot of women in particular not do well on paleo in terms of losing the weight that they wanted,
Interesting.
and maybe getting a little too much red meat. And there's some scientific underpinnings to this. Women tend not to do as well with red meat as men do. And there's some interesting data showing that you can hit a plateau with your body mass index
Wow.
on paleo.
And is that so? I mean, that's completely, again, because a lot of people think about losing weight as calories in, calories out. So if I just clean up my diet, everything's going to take care of itself. So paleo, you're assumingly eating fewer starches, which most people think of as good for losing weight. So why would eating more red meat in some cases be not so good for women? Like, what's happening there?
Well, there's a few things that are happening. You can sometimes get your carbohydrate content down a little too low.
Hmm.
So that is an issue for a lot of women. And there's a difference between men and women. There's this thing called the testosterone advantage that men have. And I think after taking care of women for the past 25 years, that men actually do better with red meat than women do.
Sure.
So there's a few reasons for that. It can affect your estrogen levels. We know that meat eaters have higher estrogen levels. And we've got this issue right now of estrogen dominance, estrogen pollution, where we get exposed to estrogen through plastics, through conventional meat. There's lots of different sources. Alcohol is another thing that raises estrogen. So that's one of the issues. And then getting back to this carb issue, I think sometimes women will restrict their carbohydrates too much, and it can lead to problems with their thyroid and also with their adrenal function. So I think what we want to do is we want to find that happy middle where you have enough carbohydrates for your endocrine system to be working really well. And you also have the other forms of protein to kind of balance out the way that your estrogen is working.
That's very insightful, because the low carb thing is just like, it's so overplayed, I find. And I think that's a really important message to have people understand. Like, if you go low carb for too long, like, your thyroid is done. And there's so much research that shows what you're saying here. So that's something like, but again, I tell my audience, like, you have to be nutritionally literate, because if you don't have the owner's manuals for your own body, you're like, how do I lift up the hood to put the windshield wiper fluid in, right? And this is the kind of stuff people need to know, because if they don't, then they're just flying blind and they're doing things that are causing more harm than good, following low carb for too long or whatever it might be. So what are some other things that women that you've seen and dealt with are maybe doing that is not good for their hormones, and kind of halting their weight loss?
Well, another common problem, and I know you and I see eye to eye on this one, is women understand that they need to step away from sugar, but then they start choosing more of the artificial sweeteners. And I think that's been now shown to be worse for your metabolism. If you have a broken metabolism, it's going to break it further. If you don't have a broken metabolism, it could break it. And I just see a lot of women who, as a pickup, a pick me up in the afternoon, they'll grab for a diet soda. Mm-hmm. And that can really cause problems with your insulin in particular. So these are, some of the hormones that we are resetting that I think are important drivers of metabolism: estrogen, insulin, leptin, cortisol, thyroid, growth hormone, and testosterone. Those are the 7 that I like to focus on. So that's another common one. And then stress. Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel like people sort of plug their ears when they hear the stress conversation. Yeah, here we go again. But it's amazing, Yuri. I mean, I certainly found this was true for me when I was in my 30s, that I could think my way into a hormone imbalance.
Sure.
So I was overweight, but I was making it 10 times worse just with the, kind of the extra set of platforms that I had. And so that's another important piece to break through. And there's so many different ways to do it. So I think that's kind of the hopeful part of this.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, on the previous book, you had a picture of you with a yoga mat. Which is awesome, because you love doing yoga, and I'm thinking that's part of the kind of stress relaxation kind of technique that you would recommend for people, at least partly to look at considering doing.
Well, it's one of them. I mean, I'm a yoga teacher, so clearly I'm converted. Cool. And yeah, I totally love yoga, and it saved me when I had 2 kids in my 30s. But I also appreciate that, I have women who'll come in and see me in the office, and they'll say, just don't tell me to go to a yoga class. Like, I can't. That's just not going to happen. Yeah. So I really believe that, there's many different paths to Rome. And you can reset your mindset in so many different ways. And for some people, it may start off just with taking a supplement that helps them, just try to wrangle cortisol, that stress hormone, so that it's not wreaking havoc in the body. Things like phosphatidylserine or more omega-3s. And then I do think that some sort of contemplative practice, whether that's visualization or even going to a bar class. I'm a big fan of bar fitness, for the meditative qualities as well as the high intensity intervals.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I find for me, rock climbing or wall climbing, which I never do, by the way, so I'm totally like blowing smoke here, but I did it in the past at some point. And flying for me are very meditative, because you're very much in the moment, and there's no, especially for us people who think a lot and it's just like nonstop. Those types of practices are awesome, and I love yoga as well, which is tremendous. So when it comes to, like, do you think that people are going, like, I guess women, are they going Is it just the foods that are causing issues, or are there environmental triggers? Are there environmental? Are there toxins in the environment that you talked about, like these xenoestrogens from like plastics and stuff? Is that a big problem? Like, do they really understand what's happening outside of like what they're putting in their mouth? Like, is this really affecting us?
Yeah, this is a great question. And the way I kind of think about the body and, whatever it is you're up against, whether you're trying to lose weight or just have more energy through the day, and I love your book in that regard. I think about, at the core of your health is your DNA, your set of genetic material. And then kind of another outer ring from this is the exposome, which is this term that was coined a few years ago to describe the exposures, kind of the aggregate exposures that you have. And that includes things like plastics, bisphenol A, phthalates that are, fragrances that women put on their skin. And there was one study showing that the average woman uses about 515 synthetic chemicals every day on her skin. So this is a real problem. It's not just a minor thing. If you look scientifically, I'm trained as an epidemiologist, and if you look at how the obesity rate has tripled in the past 50 years, you can't explain that just with the math of calories and the amount of exercise that we're doing.
Yeah.
So it goes beyond food and movement, and there appears to be the role of endocrine disruptors, plastics in the environment that have led to obesity. We call them now obesogens. So we definitely want to be, doing what we can to reduce our exposure and also to get rid of those endocrine disruptors that we have in the body. And there's quite good science on this. For instance, one problem that happens when people lose weight and they start to stall in their weight loss, they hit a plateau, they hit a wall, is that when you lose weight, you're burning fat, which is where you store endocrine disruptors. So you want to be really thoughtful about how you're getting rid of those endocrine disruptors so that they don't then lead to a stall or a plateau with your weight loss.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want those circulating around in your blood, just kind of hanging out. That's yeah, not a lot of people think about that. That's good to know. I just totally lost my train of thought there. So yeah, so going back to losing weight, so it's we're really seeing. I think we're seeing the last couple of years, especially like a movement, hopefully away from understanding that you can do everything you want, diet-wise and exercise-wise, but there's still stuff that's happening inside, like metabolically, that if you're not taking care of, none of that other stuff is going to make sense. It's not going to do anything, and we're seeing so much of that nowadays, and that's why I think this book is so timely, because you talk about these kind of 7 resets, right? These different hormones that need to be kind of like checked up on and kind of well tuned. What are some simple steps? Let's just take like 1 or 2 of them maybe. What are some simple steps that people could take to kind of reset their insulin or reset their estrogen?
Sure. Well, I'm a big fan of hormone-friendly living. And I think the most exciting part about all of this is the science showing that you can reset your hormones in 72 hours.
Wow.
So you can do this. This is not some gigantic project. This gap that you're talking about where you feel like you're doing everything right, but you're not losing the weight, chances are the gap is due to hormones. And so this is something that you want to be addressing. But some of the simple things that you can do include, for estrogen, giving up alcohol. And, what I encourage people to do kind of leading up to my 21-day program is to drink less but better quality, because I happen to really love wine, and it's hard for me to give it up for 21 days, right?
Especially when you have wine like the wine cave we experienced last year. That was pretty nice.
Yeah, surrounded by amazing wine.
Oh, totally.
So, the sad thing is we know that alcohol raises your estrogen level. It's been linked to an increased risk of breast cancer. It changes the estrobolome. So I'm sure your listeners have heard of the microbiome, the aggregate set of bacteria, microbes, and their DNA that are in your gut. There's a subset of the microbiome that controls your estrogen levels. And alcohol adversely impacts your estrobolome. It also raises cortisol. It disrupts your sleep. There's just many other reasons why it gets in the way of fat burning. So that's one of the tips, but let me give you a more positive one. So eating more shellfish, eating more cold water fish can really make a difference in the body. I happen to carry something called the PPARG gene, and that gene basically shows that women will lose weight if they eat more of the right kinds of fats. And so
Wow,
for me, that's omega 3s.
very cool.
And I kind of discovered this on my own. I went raw vegan and I didn't lose much weight. I was spending hours and hours in the kitchen preparing food, but I didn't lose much weight. And
Hmm.
when I added on shellfish and sea and basically cold water fish like wild caught Alaskan salmon, that made all the difference in terms of my weight loss. So
That's
it's
amazing.
those kind of swaps that can make a big difference.
That's very cool. Yeah, that's great. I mean, and there's obviously many more of these really cool insights in your book. So, did you write the book because of kind of the weight issues you had several years ago, and this was kind of like your own kind of salvation that then you just wanted to help more people with?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking because it's a little bigger than that.
Yeah.
If I'm honest about it, yes, I was struggling with my body. There was a vanity quality to it. But I also realized when I went to my doctor, my primary care doctor, and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm fat, I'm stressed out, I've got PMS. What can we do about it?" And he offered me a birth control pill because he said, that will fix your hormones, not. And he also offered me an antidepressant and he said, you need to exercise more and eat
Wow.
less. And so that was frustrating for me, but then I got angry and I realized that millions of women are being told this across the US, across Canada, across the world, and that needs to change because it's wrong.
Hmm.
And what I know, we know that 80% of women are not satisfied with their body. 80%. And you know, there's a beautiful prophecy from the Dalai Lama where he says the world will be saved by Western women. And we can argue whether that's actually going to be Western women, but I think he's right about the women.
Right, totally. Yeah.
But I don't think that we can save the world if we're loathing our bodies, if we're obsessed about thigh gap.
Hmm.
And so what I really want for women is to feel back home in their bodies again, to find this way of ease with food and cell to soul practices so that their hormones are back in balance. And if I could edit what the Dalai Lama said, I would say that the world will be saved by women whose hormones are in balance.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely don't want to be having a PMS woman trying to save the world. I mean, that may be, well, that may be very, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a good motivator, but nonetheless, that's a very cool statement. What about for women who are kind of menopausal, going through that period of time where kind of everything's out of whack? What do you suggest when it comes to, are you seeing a lot of estrogen dominance in menopause, which is a time where kind of estrogen generally plummets? Like, it's very interesting.
Yes.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. I have a lot of women who come to me and they say, "Oh, I'm 58, I'm past all that. I don't have to worry about my hormones anymore." And this is one of those myths that I just totally want to bust because we know that women after menopause, yes, your estrogen comes down, but your progesterone comes down even further.
Hmm.
So you still have estrogen dominance. The rate is somewhere around 75 to 80% of women over the age of 35,
Wow.
including after menopause. And what I think is so exciting is that you can reset your hormones with your fork. That's really the message of this book, how to do it with your fork. So after menopause, we know that if you can get rid of the bad estrogens and not keep recirculating them, kind of like bad karma, it's going to make all the difference in terms of your risk of estrogen dominant diseases such as breast cancer, endometrial cancer, ovarian cancer.
That's amazing. And is it as simple as just kind of doing a cleanse, or is it a little bit more involved? To like, I just don't want people to kind of jump out to their health food store and grab like a liver detox kit. Like, yeah, I'm
Right.
sure it's a little bit more involved than that. Um, I mean, that may help in the short term, but I'm sure there's obviously more sustainable solutions.
Well, I don't think a liver detox is going to do it because those tend to be pretty harsh. They also, many of them are not well proven,
Hmm.
unfortunately. And so, what I think we need to do is we need to use the best science at our disposal to reset these hormones. Now, your liver is such a powerhouse when it comes to resetting your hormones. It's kind of like the traffic cop in the body. especially when it comes to estrogen and testosterone, plus a few other hormones. So I think it's crucial that you find a way to kind of coax and nudge the body towards hormone balance. That's the kind of balance that will stick,
Cool.
rather than a liver detox, which I think is more of a drill sergeant, kind of like take all these herbs and, some milk thistle and, a little bit of N-acetylcysteine and let's make you poop a ton. We just need a better, more sustainable shift in the hormones.
Yeah, totally. So what's your best advice for the busy mom who maybe is a mother of teenagers, so she might be in her 40s, early 50s, and she's working, she's stressed out, and she still wants to lose those last 10 to 20 pounds, but is having trouble. Well, like, what are some simple kind of daily actions that woman can take?
Yeah, well, I think a really good one for the busy mom, and oh my gosh, I thought you were describing me when you just went through that list of things. So I'm a busy mom of two. I know what it's like. One of them's 15, the other's 10. And I think you've got to find something that really fits in your life. Maybe it would feel better to just go to a spa for a few weeks. And, I wish we could all do that, but it's just not practical with how busy our lives are. So some of the things that are really helpful are, I think, periodically to get off of grains. So I've been looking at the data on grains and what it does to your thyroid in particular, and also to your cortisol levels if you have any type of intolerance.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to have that. I work with thousands of people who also have an issue with it.
And
So periodic,
are you talking about like wheats, or are you talking about all grains like quinoa, buckwheats, or is it specifically to like the glutinous grains?
well, the glutinous grains are by far the worst
Yeah.
offenders, but I am just seeing a lot of women who have things like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. They're carb intolerant. They
Mm-hmm.
don't do as well with some of the healthier grains that maybe have a lower glycemic index.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a bigger topic, but there's also some anti-nutrients in some of the grains that I think can periodically cause problems for women and lead to hormone imbalance. So that's one tip. I have a friend who texted me this morning and she just said, I keep binging on gluten-free crackers. And I think we want to get really honest about how when you're stressed, when cortisol is high, often we're feeding ourselves grains. And it can lead to problems with hormone balance and with how nutrients get shuttled around the body.
Sure.
Now, another tip for that woman, which is even simpler, is to take a high potency multivitamin. So filling in some of those really common micronutrient gaps, things like copper, zinc, selenium, making sure you're getting the vitamin D that you need. Those all help your thyroid function at
Mm-hmm.
its best.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I've got three little guys, and they're screaming
I can
upstairs.
hear.
Yeah, I'm like, it's amazing. So I think parenting is a very good lesson in terms of how to live life as zen as possible, because I think it's easy if you don't have kids. It's easy to just kind of like take off and chill out, but when you have kids, it's a good challenge, and I think it's in a good way to really up your game and figure out ways in the craziest of times to become like the eye, or the calm in the eye of the storm. So those are some great recommendations. So thank you very much. So
Well, I love that metaphor, Yuri, because
yeah,
we're not going to get rid of the storm,
no,
but the
exactly.
more that you can find the eye of the storm, the better. And I think that that's such a good analogy to use as we try to create hormonal balance.
I mean, I think awareness comes a lot of like comes to play a lot of this. Like when our kids are going crazy, like one reaction is like I can yell and kind of like get into the storm, or I can just take a deep breath and just be like, and like my mantra is like I am the calm in the eye of the storm, and it's just like I have to close my eyes and breathe through it. And it's amazing. Like you can, if you're very aware and conscious, like you can feel the difference physiologically in your body if you yell versus just kind of like chilling out. You can feel it. Like you can almost feel the hormones or the lack of them just kind of surging through your blood. So I'm very excited for the book. I think everyone watching this, listening to this, if you're on the blog or on YouTube or wherever else, we'll put up a link on the video or below it somewhere, and strongly recommend you grab a copy of the book. And you're giving away a bunch of cool free copies for, it'll probably only last like half a day based on how popular the book is going to be. So if you're watching this, please don't miss out because it's an amazing book. And even if you don't get a free copy, you should still like go to Amazon afterwards and get it anyways because it's amazing. So so thank you for writing this. I think a lot of women who are in my audience will definitely resonate with this, especially there's a number of them that come to mind. One of them, I'm not going to mention her name, mentioned that she was doing like one of our most active members in one of our Facebook groups. Great positive individual, always contributing great stuff. But she struggled with her weight for like, 40 pounds. And she's been living organically, eating organically, doing everything right. And I asked her what was going on. And she said, in caps lock, stress is huge for me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you kind of just summed it up right there. So if you're a woman, and like, heck, even if you're a guy, like, I mean, there's probably a lot of wisdom from men as well. I mean, I got a lot out of this. So a tremendous amount of wisdom that I think will serve a lot of people. So thank you so much, Sarah, for writing it.
Oh, thank you, Yuri. Absolutely. My pleasure.
Any finishing kind of last words of wisdom to impart upon our audience before we finish?
Well, I like what you said about, having that choice with your children, between kind of going into the stress of the situation and maybe yelling versus closing your eyes, taking a pause, and activating this more resourceful part of the brain. Mm-hmm. We have that choice every moment. It may not feel like we have that choice, but all the science shows the problem is with the perceived stress. So if you can create a little bit of space there by taking a deep belly breath, as you described, it just makes such a big difference.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, simple things. That's great. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time. Guys, check out the book, The Hormone Reset Diet. There should be a link somewhere below, above, beyond. And check it out. It's a great book, and I highly recommend it. So thank you for joining us. Hope you got some great stuff out of this, and we'll talk to you soon.